Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here. My name is Andreas Örnefors. I will chair this panel, and it is called String, a corridor for Scandinavian communication/connection. The future String region aims to unite 4 countries and 14 million people through a corridor for Scandinavian communication. But what are the ideas behind the infrastructure, and what are their potential? String is an infrastructure project uniting Norway, Sweden, Denmark and Germany. 8 regions, 5 cities, 3 metropolitan areas and 14 million people hailed as a new mega-region. String believes there is strength in numbers and that meeting the future requires to actively forge sustainability across national borders. Recent crises have, however, demonstrated the vulnerability of such an ambition. So our panel asks, what are the ideas behind the infrastructure uniting Oslo and Hamburg? What will motivate millions of people to move more responsibly across their mega region? What can they seek and what may they find? Will String prove itself more sustainable when faced with future challenges than other experiments in the past? And what can we learn from the Øresund-region? Can String even turn into a showcase of a new Nordic normal? To discuss these questions, we are very honored to have panelists with us. Rebecca Rosenqvist-Elliott, who is a Deputy Managing Director at String. We have also Magnus Ehrenberg, who is representing Ehrenberg and Sørensen Communication. We have Mats Rosén from Kävlinge Kommun present here on board of our ship of a new story, and Nils Poro Petersen, who is a member of the Swedish Parliament. Most welcome to you. I'd like to ask you all first to present yourself in the order I mentioned you. So Rebecca, can you just say some words about who you are?
Yes, of course. So my name is Rebecca, and as mentioned, I'm the Deputy Managing Director for this rather mysterious sounding organization, String, who's already been presented a little bit in terms of its remit, and I'm hoping to be able to say a few more words about that. And I'm very happy to be here today, of course, and I was delighted to learn that there was this seminar named after String. So it's good to see that it's catching on. And I'm joining you from my rather sweaty living room from Copenhagen today.
Thank you. Most welcome. Magnus.
Danke, Herr Professor. Thank you for having us here. And as I said before, I'm standing here and looking at the island of Bornholm, but I'm not on Bornholm. We are one of the founding partners for Folkemødet on Bornholm. But this year we are just digital here due to all the problems with the borders that we still have. My name is Magnus Ehrenberg, and I'm founder and president of the communication company Ehrenberg Sørensen Communication. We have offices in Hamburg, in Copenhagen, in Stockholm, and of course, Nils, in my hometown Malmö. We work since 25 years roundabout with ferry companies, harbors, and connecting people in the southern part of the Baltic Sea.
Thank you. And Mats.
Okay, right present now I'm a manager for business development in Kävlinge local community. My history is actually 25 years as well as Magnus with Baltic Sea Corporation. I've been working at the ministry in Kiel. I've been one of the organizations that created a sub-regional cooperation about Baltic Sea, and then I've also been manager for Baltic Sea EU programs, three of such programs.
Thank you. And last but not least, Nils, please.
Well, I might be least because I don't work at String now. I don't have 25 years of experience either, but I've been working with the regional questions for about 15 years at least. So member of parliament for the Centre Party from Malmö, and very engaged in the questions surrounding the development of the transborder regions here and the Nordic cooperation, and of course especially the Øresund-region. And Dane originally.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. I've asked Rebecca to say a few words to start with so that we can capture the entire vision with String that is kind of both within and beyond what I've said so far, so that we can get a better understanding of what this project actually is about. So, Rebecca, if you could start to talk a little bit about what String is and what your visions are in forging a major region like that between Oslo and Hamburg. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And as it's already been alluded to, the strange name, despite we are nothing to do with underwear. I frequently get that question still, but that's not what it's about. But we are a political cross-border organization that has 13 members that run from Oslo in the north to Hamburg in the south. It's the biggest kind of cities and regions that span this corridor, and we also go now across southern Denmark. So, as I'm sure most of you know, that means that we cover quite a large part of what's known as the TNT ScanMed corridor, so kind of the northern part of this EU-appointed transport corridor. And you can say that our overall goal, idealistic as it sounds, is to kind of create a society that lives up to the standards of our inhabitants. So make sure that the people who live in this stretch are living somewhere where there's opportunities for qualified work, that's attractive internationally, that has a certain level of economic welfare, where climate targets are met and superseded, etc. So like many other organizations, we kind of aim to live up to the EU world goals about sustainability mainly. And our kind of core belief then in trying to create this utopia is, as you mentioned earlier, that we're stronger together. And if we can create a naturally bound together region that is actually properly connected through infrastructure, amongst other things, we can all benefit from the kind of developments and the choices and the options that comes with having this larger catchment area. And this kind of thinking has led to the idea that you mentioned as well of creating this mega region. And this concept is something that the OECD actually came to us. They knocked on our door and essentially sold us on the concept of a mega region. And what you can say is that it basically means a large region that has several different growth centers, connected both kind of urbanly and rurally, but that are bound together by certain strengths that we have in common, certain things that we can all do well and that binds us together. And of course, also bound by connectability. So when the OECD came to us, they essentially said, we've heard that you're trying to connect an area between Oslo and Hamburg. And this, according to us, is the future, according to the OECD, that growth is seen in larger catchment areas that spans both rural and metropolitan areas. And they said that, do you know that the region that you're trying to cover is de facto already world leading when it comes to producing and testing and exporting green tech solutions? Because jointly, we have a lot of competences in this area. We have, kind of wind power in Hamburg in northern Germany. Oslo is world leading in hydrogen. You have electrification on the west kind of coast of Sweden. There's city planning and bioeconomy in Copenhagen and Skåne and so forth. But their kind of message to us was that you're already doing this really well internationally, but you're not leveraging on it at all because the world doesn't really know. What you have here is a, comparatively speaking, pretty small area where competencies like this are really clustered together. So if we can join these competences together and try and market this region as one, essentially, in an international setting, that can lead to more investments, it can be better for our economy and for our attractiveness, and it can fulfill this vision of better choice and all the things I mentioned earlier. So essentially, what we are now doing is working together with the OECD for them to, they have actually just launched last week a report of 23 recommendations of what we should do to kind of formalize this cooperation and to meet the challenges in building this mega region. And so when we're trying to kind of build this coherent region, as I mentioned earlier, what we want is to be viewed as one kind of by the rest of the world. But if you have an interest in investing in green tech, you can set up camp in Malmö, but at the same time get all the competencies in Hamburg or in Oslo or in Skåne, whatever, for free, essentially. That's the ethos. But in order to be able to kind of create that region, a large thing of what we need, apart from making sure that investment agencies work together and so forth, is infrastructure, which we're talking about here today, is connectivity. We have to be able to get from A to B, of course, both domestically and internationally, to fulfill that vision. So, as I mentioned, we're working on all levels of government to solidify this cooperation, to get a common framework, common procurement practices, a joint investment agency umbrella, and so forth. But as I've just mentioned, there is no doubt that infrastructure is an incredibly important component to erase these kind of national borders. And I know that there are challenges to mobility that you touched on before, but I think the only way to stop the issue that arises from it, and is to stop this kind of nationalistic silo thinking, is to solidify. So we work on key infrastructure projects to make them a reality, and we work mainly on the lobbying side of them. And of course, also part of it is to kind of maximize the effects of the Femern Belt fixed link, which we know now is coming. So it's also a question of how can we make that the kind of game-changing component to tie the region together that it has the potential to be. So I think I'll stop there. And
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving us that vision in a nutshell, and I'm immediately passing over the word to Magnus Ehrenberg, who is an expert on infrastructure. Magnus, are you with us?
I am very much with you, yes. But here are happening things also. I had a tractor on the field outside, and living on the countryside, you have to say hello to the guys also in the tractor.
Of course.
It's your voters, Nils, or it was some years ago. Yeah. But let's say like this. I moved to Germany in 1988, and that was, of course, a fantastic time, because then I could see and feel how the wall went down, and how the communist system was defeated, and we got a bigger Germany, and very open Germany also, that is very different to the both Germanys that we had before. That was a fantastic time. And I must say something sometimes when I listen to, and don't take it personal, Rebecca, Spring, I had a feeling that you were saying that we don't have any infrastructure today. If I see the development that we have had since 1990 till today, it has been fantastic. And I would like to ask you, there might be a Femern Belt tunnel sometimes. I'm not so very fond of it. And you might have heard that the German court stopped all the buildings on the German side last week because there have been some mistakes made. Some of you know how many departures there are between Rødby and Puttgarden every day, a normal day where we don't have Corona. Can someone tell me that? Give me a figure.
250 something?
48 per day.
More guess? A normal day we have 96 departure a day around the clock. And we have then an extra freight ferry also between. So we have infrastructure, and maybe 2 or 3 times a year you have some waiting times at the ferry. We have from Norway, we have daily departures to Germany and to Denmark with big ferries. We have departures from northern part of Germany to Gothenburg, to Trelleborg, to Malmö. We have infrastructure today, so I think we should be, and that is something that I miss also. It's very good to talk about the future and to building the region together. But I think you should also don't forget to take the infrastructure that there are today and take them inside. I know that the ferry companies are standing a little bit outside and looking in what are they doing. Talk to them, make them be part of this infrastructure, because they have, if we wouldn't have had the infrastructure with the ferries the last 1.5 years, we wouldn't have any fruit in Sweden. We wouldn't have any flowers from Holland in Helsinki. So infrastructure works rather well, but there is much to do, of course. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, it's very good to have visions. But the second, if we see now how the politicians, not Nils, but other politicians, have been working the last 1.5 years, it is shit. It's terrible. And before Mette Frederiksen or Stefan Löfven talk about new infrastructure, they should open the borders, and they should guarantee that what happened last year never ever will happen again. I am standing here and looking at the island of Bornholm. On the 21st of December, Sweden closed the border to show that we can also be hard guys. So that 40,000 Bornholmer could not come to Copenhagen via Sweden. So before we start talking about 3 or 4 or 5 new bridges or tunnels over the Øresund, or more tunnels to Germany, we have to open up the borders, and we have to have some contract or treaty between those 3 countries that guarantee that the borders will be open forever.
Thank you. That sounds like a great vision. Mats, you represent a community that will somehow be swallowed by string.
We are already.
You are already.
What Magnus has mentioned is
what's your take on these two issues?
We have a great challenge because Skåne at present we can't perform what we could do because of the threshold of the motorways. It's filled with lorries transporting containers from Hamburg to Gothenburg. And this is one of the key issues why, compared to the other 2 metropolitan regions in Sweden, Gothenburg and Stockholm, we are less performing every year. And we see it and these percentages, they leverage every year. So we go more and more behind Stockholm and Gothenburg. Now, thanks to COVID, we are not that bad last year, thanks to COVID, because they are further away, so it costs them more. But it can't be the price of a global pandemic that we can perform better in Skåne. We have to say, what do we not need in Skåne? What type of transportation do we not need that go directly? I would see more on sea. I agree with you, Magnus, but I also see the ferries. And I see the key issue now is people. For the people is the new gold. It is the new gold, the brains of our citizens and the community, like there's 40 million, as Rebecca mentioned, to let people to come together, explore new business idea, develop new research institute, and all this. We don't need more containers. We need more people.
Thank you for that. We're coming back to the people and brains later on, but Niels, you are working politically on these issues, and you've heard here the discussion. What is infrastructure? What kind of infrastructure do we want? But also, what are the obstacles for us to creating major regions? And we have had what Magnus mentioned before, these challenges in the Øresund-region before. What do you think is needed from the political level to achieve these goals of creating a united infrastructure, but also coming over the obstacles that we are running into all the time? A crisis situation happens, that the borders go down, and we have obstacles in our way.
Well, I like that you introduced me by saying we'll get back to the brains later. But I'll take that. It's hard to be a politician sometimes. But I think that what we need, and we've been around that already, is that the politicians really need to talk to each other a lot more over the borders. That's the basic problem right now. I was in Copenhagen this morning and having a debate with among others, Christian Thulesen Dahl from Dansk Folkeparti. And I mean, we do have to respect, of course, that we have different countries, we have the borders, etc. But at the moment, there's a lack of perspective when it comes to the national level, especially because right now we've just the last couple of years lost our most important ally in the European arena, which is the UK. We've been the countries that have been more like stern financially, have been wanting to keep powers at the national level, etc. And now we have the transnational or the more unionist countries gaining power, and we're losing it relatively. And then we are just like 15, 16 million people here. Then we have the Dutch with us, perhaps, and some more, and we're bickering between each other on details instead of getting together and trying to be stronger on the European level. That is strategically an incredibly poor choice. So with just everything else aside, that is the big strategic question. How do we, in the European setting, which this of course is, this is a European question, it's not a Nordic question. To some extent a global question, but specifically a Nordic question. How do we make our city regions more relevant on a European and Northern European especially level? And we are losing that perspective completely on the political level. And that is sort of like the most important question. And of course there are a lot of different, so like what infrastructure is the most important, etc. But before we can talk about how we're going to be transporting ourselves between these regions, we have to say that this is one region. That is the first and most important question. So I think that is the biggest obstacle, that we are losing the Nordic objective at the moment. And that is a very big problem. And I do believe that, and I know Magnus thinks so too, even if he said something else, is that it's not that before we've solved the existing problems. Before we talk about the next level of infrastructure, we have to solve the current problems. We have to do both, of course. We cannot wait. I mean, there's so much internal policy reasons for Danish politicians to sort of like have to use Sweden as a bad example, and that's going to continue for quite some time. And that's not because any sort of factual reason. It's because of a internal political sort of like dialogue that makes that relevant, and that gives you points, and people are going to continue to do that. That means that this border region is going to be contested for a long time still. That is very, very sad, and we have to do something about that, but it's going to be there. So we have to make sure that while we are solving that problem, we cannot sort of like keep back on investments in the future, because whatever the present is, the present will pass, and the future will come, and we should be ready for that.
Thank you, Niels. Rebecca, you've heard about Magnus said we need to include infrastructure that already is there and experiences that already are there. Mats was talking about then the next problem: how will we make the people move across the region, and why? And how can we make the stakeholders and the politicians aware of these facts? Is that also one of the objectives of the string network, or is the string network only down to hard infrastructure? What is your take on what you have heard so far from the other panelists?
I mean, it's impossible not to agree. I think what's been said already. And in terms of Magnus's point, of course, I don't think anyone is disputing the undeniable fact that there already is infrastructure. Of course there is. But the issue is that we know that the infrastructure scene is changing. We can represent different interests or have different takes on it. But we do know that the Femmerbelt is coming, and we do know it's going to cut out 160 kilometers of freight transport. And we do know it's going to reduce travel time significantly, which will be important to producers exporting fresh produce, etc., between the countries. So it's an undeniable fact that it's there, and it's leveraging on it. It's not denying its existence, but it's essentially making sure that what it can lead to is taken care of. And in order to do that, to make sure that it's not just another freight corridor being built, we do need to look further afield. We do need to look at the missing links, and we know what they are. We know that it's going to increase freight transport between Oslo and Gothenburg, for example, and we know it's going to affect the harbour of Gothenburg, which means that we do need to look at double tracks, etc. So it's not a case of denying the existing infrastructure, it's making sure that we build on what's coming. And if I may just follow up a little bit of what Niels was saying as well, because I think that's the actual absolute key of the issue, and that's very much what we're trying to achieve. I think the idea of creating a connected region, not just with infrastructure, but with political dialogue, isn't challenged, or I don't think it is necessarily threatened by the current development and closed borders. I think it's quite the opposite. It makes the need for that vision more important than ever before. And, you know, we will always have national borders that can close, that can make transport cooperation harder. That's just a fact. But I mean, that's no reason to be sort of kind of essentially doom and gloom about the situation. But to make that situation less vulnerable, we do need to strengthen corporations like what we're talking about today, because it's easy to close borders and go nationalistic when there are no formal structures or no formal corporations preventing national governments from doing so. And we all know there is, I mean, Nils mentioned it earlier, there's very little coordination between countries as it is. We know from the proposed national transport plans, for example, that they do not speak together hardly whatsoever. So by setting up more formalized forums like a transport commission, bringing together the transport ministers from all 4 countries, for example, or joint investment ideas and umbrellas, then we do get a more of a stronghold, and we get a stronger voice, which makes it harder to close borders. And like Nils said, it also gives us a much stronger voice at an EU level. It's much harder to close borders and to ignore voices when it's several countries uniting in the same message. So in short, a very long answer to your question, but yes, absolutely, the political discussion and level is absolutely at the core, I think, of what we need to address.
Thank you. Magnus, what do you think? What are the next steps? What is needed? Do we need a transnational transport commission? Who should sit there? Who should take the decisions? Should we build the region bottom up or top down?
Yeah, if you've been working with those things for 25, 30 years, I don't know how many invitations to different conferences I've got in those times, and I must say I don't go to those conferences anymore. It is of course good when national ministers talk to each other, but the output is most of the time new papers. I think it's very, very important that we have regional politicians talking to each other, and then you should not forget the northern part of Germany. And I know that Schleswig-Holstein and Hamburg have been looking very much about now the last year why the Swedes and Danes don't have open borders, and because they see us as Scandinavia. And then one problem when we talk about regions is that Skåne is very much concentrating on Schleswig-Holstein, and you forgot Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, that was a part of Sweden and was a part of Denmark. And talking about existing connections, we today have the shortest connection to Germany from Ystad, the port of Ystad. You have daily ferry connections, and it takes us 2 hours to get to the island of Rügen, and then you are after 1 hour on the German Autobahn net. And that is something that is existing infrastructure also that is forgotten, because Mecklenburg-Vorpommern is a little bit forgotten, this cooperation. I think it's very important to take regional politicians also from the northern part of Germany. And then the second thing is to get companies come together, to get private companies come together. And just to give you one information about how it could work, we have in Malmö a very big Swedish bakery, Pågens. And if you go to McDonald's in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, all of the bread at McDonald's are baked in Malmö. And then they take the ferry directly from Trelleborg to Rostock. And this is something that works since 10 years ago. And that works very, very good. And you have many such private projects, and I think that should be more highlighted in the future. So we don't need any more conferences around the Baltic Sea. We need cooperation between the regions and the private companies.
Excellent. Mats, sorry to interrupt Magnus. Mats,
and
Nils will get one-liner each to conclude our discussion.
Magnus, actually I have booked the ferry boat to Rügen with my family the 1st of July, because which date that is, the way where they have the COVID passport ready for me and my wife, so hopefully. I would mention another thing, because the reason I think this is very important with the string is to keep up the political interest and the marketing of this region, in a sense that we are strong enough to do it ourselves. The biggest threat we can have in infrastructure today is China, because China is buying all over the world by its Belt and Silk Road. I would strongly that we keep this as Nordic and North Germany.
The Amber Road.
Yeah, and that we keep this in always on top of the mind, because there are threats to all stable political systems by other actors on the global level.
Thank you, Mats. And a one-liner from Nils to conclude and summarize the discussion. What is the next step? What is needed?
What is needed is for the prime ministers to start talking again about the Nordic region as a common project.
Right, that was
Very
a
good.
very clear word. And with that being said, Rebecca, any final reflections you would share with us? Thank you so much, and I hope that this conversation today was one small step towards the creation of a great region. I thank you very much for being here, Rebecca, Magnus and Niels and Mats. And now we are sailing from Helsingør to Helsingborg again, and we want to wish you a very nice continuation of your day wherever you are in the region. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.